I'll start in 3, 2, and 1. The biggest question that people, companies, and financial institutions ask is, where should I place my money in order to get the best possible return? The entire point of the financial market is to protect and grow our hard-earned money across the various available stocks and asset classes. The question that we are going to answer today is, where do we put that? The first thing that needs to be done is to take a look at what the current market outlook will look like over the next 5 years, given the various economic conditions that might happen. We have 3 core assumptions. Firstly, we believe that interest rates will go down. Currently, they are high. In the past, they were low. And in the future, it will continue to be cyclical. Second, we believe that a shift has happened within major financial institutions, opting to prioritize income-generating opportunities over opportunities with high earning growth potential. What this means is that the likely stocks to benefit from these are those that are relatively safe and reliable because they pay dividends and capital appreciation. Third, we think the Philippine peso is primed for growth. We think that foreign direct investments, growing remittances, economic initiatives, and demographic trends have helped prop up the Philippines for relatively stable growth for its national industries. Given that these catalysts are what we expect to happen in the next 5 to 10 years, our investment philosophy focuses on choosing the right balance between income-generating stocks and growth potential. The lens of looking at our strategy is through the FTSR framework: fundamentals, technicals, sentiment, and risk management, while also taking into account the importance, relevance, and sustainability of ESG investing. The most important, or the next question then, is which industries will benefit the most from these catalysts? Our team chose 3 industries: the banking, transportation, and utilities industry. The core thing to note in each of these industries is that they are relatively resilient to market shocks due to their steady and consistent demand. This ensures that regardless of how volatile the market is, these industries are able to weather it out. We chose the banking sector because it is the prime position for benefiting from lowering interest rates. The interesting and important part about this is that this trend will benefit small to mid-tier banks due to the rising credit access for MSMEs and for people within more niche segments. Obviously, the lowering interest rates also make these banks prime for investment for more business growth. The second industry that we chose was the utilities industry because of how stable both the demand and the dividend yields are for the energy industry. As demand will continue to rise in a country full of young people, the stability this industry offers us gives us a guaranteed trust for cash flows. Last, we chose the transportation sector specifically because of the opportunity of growing trade agreements within the Philippines and the broader Asian market, as well as an ever-increasing demand for ports and warehouses. Specifically, these will better position specific companies who target and prioritize international markets in ASEAN, in the Middle East, and in Africa. These specific benefits are industry-centered. What we want to do is target the most profitable companies within these sectors for the best possible chance of getting the most yield. So, our choice for the companies with the best balance between income generation and growth opportunities are Meralco, Aboitiz Power, ICT, Security Bank, and Philippine National Bank. These 5 companies also perform above average in industry standards for ESG investing. We split the investments or percentages evenly with each company, getting 20% of the 100,000 sample capital that we provided. As you can see in our presentation, here are all the financial metrics that explain how each company is doing. Let's go through each of them one by one to justify our portfolio. Meralco's big opportunity is to compound growth given its dividend yield, as well as its relatively cheap valuations and low base from recent EPS growth. If you look at the candlestick chart, Meralco's sideways consolidation after an upward shows healthy profit taking. This can be indicative of a rest before a potential move higher. In contrast, Aboitiz Power is a relatively defensive option that has a clear interest in investing in a lot in renewable energy, such as them energizing over 302 megawatts of new clean energy in 2024 and plans to triple renewables by 2030. So, this can compound for a decent dividend yield and a lot of potential upside given our fair value estimate. As with the financial sector, Security Bank stands to benefit as interest rates decline, since it can earn more from lending while keeping its funding costs low. With many investors already heavily positioned in the country's largest banks, there's growing interest in mid-sized banks like Security Bank, which are currently undervalued and offer more attractive price-to-earnings ratios compared to both the banking sector and the index, the overall index. This creates an opportunity for Security Bank to gain investor attention and see its stock price catch up as the market rotates into more affordable, high-potential names. Similarly, Philippine National Bank presents a similar investment case to Security Bank, as both stand to benefit from lower interest rates and a potential investor shift away from fully large valued banks. Like Security Bank, PNB trades at a discount compared to sector and index averages, offering upside through valuation catch-up. It also shares the advantage of a stable funding base, but at least in PNB's case, it's more focused towards the OFW market with over 1.5 million accounts. This provides sticky, low-cost deposits that support margin expansion as rates ease. Lastly, ICT brings long-term infrastructure stability to its international port operations. The company operates under long-term agreements that often last from 20 to 30 years, which lock in revenue visibility and insulate cash flows from short-term market shocks. Additionally, its outgoing or ongoing expansion across Asia, the Middle East, and Africa provides a hedge against trade disruptions and port congestion by spreading operational risk across regions, meaning the overall risk for ICT is lessened. As I mentioned, the portfolio has an equal split of the weight distribution given by each company. But we are absolutely willing and absolutely able to do a dynamic rebalancing strategy over time. We can have quarterly or semi-annual checks and adjustments, and as was indicated in the table we put in our paper, we also compiled a list of potential adjustments that can be made, as well as the changes we ought to make on the percentages. If you want to ask us for a deep dive on that particular table, we'll be happy to expand more on that in the Q&A. The point is, absent the confines of this competition, the percentages are likely to change given what happens to the Philippine economy and how we can adjust to that. That being said, as Murphy's Law states, what can go wrong will go wrong. Here are some systemic and idiosyncratic risks that can happen and what we can do to avoid it. The Philippine stock market faces two major systemic risks. The first is economic slowdown and the second is sticky inflation, which basically just shrink bank margins and cut spending, which really hit the utilities and transport firms hard. To manage these, we focus on stocks with undervalued PE ratios and strong fundamentals, and use tools like dynamic rebalancing and income from dividends to manage risks and maximize opportunities. Company-wise, banks like PNB and Security Bank face risks from bad loans or failed digital pivots. These are the idiosyncratic risks, while ICT's global port operations expose it to trade shocks. We counter this through deep fundamental and technical analysis, clear entry and exit rules, and sector diversification, meaning that no single stock can risk the entire destruction of the portfolio. Given all of these factors, let's end off our presentation by showing the success case and return simulation forecast that shows how much we can earn potentially from the portfolio. We made two scenarios, both found in the graph. One conservative, which only show compounding through dividend reinvestment, and a more aggressive one, also taking into account growth opportunities. For the conservative scenario, as you can see, you can expect an average of 20,000 pesos, and for the aggressive one, you can see 100,000 pesos on average. We would like to focus on the conservative outlook that does not take into account growth expectation and just dividends. We'd rather under-promise and over-deliver rather than over-promise and under-deliver, because so that our analysis is not outcome-dependent on growth projections, which may or may not come into fruition. Just like in life, the only thing certain is uncertainty. We don't have a crystal ball to tell us the future. Investments are probabilistic in nature, and we are here to make calculated and informed investment decisions, prioritizing ESG while adjusting to the very dynamic conditions of the economy. That's it for our presentation. We'd be very happy to answer or take your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Now, I would like to open the Q&A portion. Ms. Grace and Sir Trace.
You did mention about the portfolio allocation. What is the basis of the 20% given for each stock?
So we wanted to take a dividends heavy risk approach towards our investment strategy. So what we want to prioritize is to make sure that we don't have over concentration or under concentration on one particular stock pick. So we opted towards an equal balance of all the stocks we have.
Any more questions?
I'd like to ask about the upside. You guys mentioned you guys have a conservative case, which is really taking into consideration just the dividends but compounding them, right? On the aggressive side, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So more on the aggressive side. So what we did with our table was getting the historical average as to how much these particular companies grow, and we added that with the value added from the dividends that we have. So over the course of 5 years, that's the total value that we estimate we could get for our aggressive case. But we want to prioritize our defensive case, given the fact that the Philippine market is sideways in nature and is hard to predict. So we want to emphasize the dividends part of our portfolio and also prioritize the upside potential of our undervalued stocks, such as in the banking sector.
So you use the net income growth over the next few years. That's what you used.
I believe we have more questions from the Zoom. Mr. Ryan, can you hear us?
Hello, I have a question on my end. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. We can hear you. Oh, it's muted. We can hear you, Bob. Go.
Nice. So I have a few questions about the banking sector. So you guys mentioned that in terms of like the relative valuation, right, that the ratios are quite cheap for the banking sector. So I just wanted to ask, first question would be, do you think that them being cheaper in terms of these ratios, is it because that these are industry laggards wherein they have lower growth potentials as compared to the big banks, or is it because they're just undervalued in general? So what key reason can you see for them having a lower pricing valuation as compared to the other big banks?
Okay. I think it's a matter of looking at both. Like the second part of what your question was, that it is inherently undervalued, precisely because there already are a lot of major banks within the Philippines, and as the catalyst that we have said is going to go through, like the lowering interest rates, there exists a really good opportunity for all of these mid-tier banks to rise up.
So I also wanted to ask about how, like, let's say the earnings side of these banks, right? So how big of a portion of their earnings are actually interest rate dependent? So say how many percent of their earnings are actually coming from loans or stuff like that, wherein it's going to be very much affected by interest rates, or is their income streams not really affected by these? So I wanted to get a sense of that to see how important this catalyst will be for the growth of these stocks moving forward.
Like these interest rates will definitely affect like the loans of all of these major banks, or all banks in general. But what we wanted to point out was that it will probably affect the larger banks more, and it will potentially harm them more, while the mid-tier banks are a lot more able to adjust for it, at least in regards to the interest rates, as they are currently undervalued.
Okay. And then next, I also wanted to ask, so there was a slide about the risk, right? So more of your risk mitigation strategies, more about portfolio balancing and the like. So I wanted to get a better understanding of why exactly you think the stocks that you selected are, let's say, not really immune, but then safer in terms of those risks. So more about the fundamental side of these companies, why are they safe from these risks, rather than your trading strategy. Why? So in terms of risk mitigation, I wanted to get a better sense of that.
Okay, so why are they resilient against risk? I think it comes from our investment philosophy, which is picking companies that are very stable in nature. As to how we implement it with our table, we gave a list of potential harms that could affect the industries as a whole, and we put reallocation percentages, so how we can adapt, since different external changes can benefit more others and harm other other companies in our portfolio, and we want to emphasize that as being part of our strategy, because not only did we pick companies that are already relatively stable, but we also pivot towards being able to get more profit with these incremental adjustments.
Can I make a second follow-up question to that? So relative to
Okay,
that
that's all for my
allocation-
questions.
Sorry. So relative to your allocation of 20% each for those stocks, why did you allocate less to the transport sector and more bias towards banking and utilities?
The transportation sector is really dependent on what will happen within the international and global scene. Despite the growth catalyst, or at least the differentiator with ICT, it's still going to be heavily affected whatever happens, for example, in the United States or in China.
But you did mention about strengthening peso in the process relative to your macro outlook, correct?
Yes.
How strong do you think the peso would be given the considerations in the current rate environment?
Relatively, or we wouldn't want to exaggerate how strong the peso will become, or how big the GDP will become in the next 5 to 10 years. As the investment philosophy that we've had, we're very conservative insofar as we think a lot of the growth catalysts, at least in that part, are also really contingent on what happens in the other two parts. So insofar as that is correct, we'd rather assume that it's going to grow, but maybe a lot more on the mean, or not as high as you can expect.
Are there any questions, Bob?
Can I just quickly ask about on the banking sector? You know, we do have quite an exposure on the banking sector. Is there any? Have you guys looked into the digitalization side of it? Is that a risk? Is that an opportunity? How do you guys look at that?
So we actually consider that a lot. So with our deep research in digitalization, we pick the banks that are most agile to these trends. So PNB has always been a leader in digitalization, and especially they've been maximizing the use of digitalization through their OFW banking services also. And for Security Bank, they're in the process of also pushing through their digitalization. So we pick banks that are undervalued, that are agile, and more tech adapt compared to bigger banks.
They might have to spend a lot.
So, do we have any more questions? How about Mr. Ryan Cheng and our judges? Questions, Papa?
Understand also of, let's say, Mirror Alpha and Avoid This Power. If I remember correctly in the slides, your price or your upside potential for Avoid This Power is like 100% in the best case. Can we go back to that slightly? Okay, last few slides, I think, were the price targets for the aggressive case. So like,
The last.
Okay. So I wanted to get a better sense of, let's say, avoid this power here. What key drivers do you think is going to allow it to reach 123%? So say, does it actually have projects in the pipeline that will allow it to increase its growth potential, or is there anything that's inherent to how the company strategizes in terms of development that will allow it to reach this growth? Because from what I could understand, the electricity and utilities industry can be quite slow in development. So yeah, I wanted to get an understanding of why you think it can reach 123% in the best case.
Okay. So we picked these companies. Meralco and APs because specifically first is AP because we are very adapt with the sustainability. So AP's portfolio is 50% sustainable, 50% sustainable plants, and they're actually even adding more and more plants, aiming to be 100% sustainable in producing power one day. And we picked Meralco because they've always been a consistent market leader with strong dividends. Along with that, they also have continuous projects into the sustainable side of their company, especially with their purchase of SPNEC. And additional also making new solar power plants around the country.
Okay. So diving a little bit deeper into that sustainability aspect, right? How vital would you say sustainability is for these companies' continued growth? Like, because the energy sector has historically not necessarily been that sustainable. And well, if we're going to look at our financial sector here in the Philippines, I wouldn't say that sustainability is really that considered. So key question would be, why would you say sustainability is vital for the continued price growth for these companies?
Specifically for, can you repeat that? This Filipino.
Okay, so just summarizing the question, why do you think sustainability is important to consider for these two companies?
Okay, so for these two companies of AP and Meralco, for me, I would consider that sustainability is definitely going to be a life and death situation for them, especially that if they're not sustainable, banks will no longer finance them, especially for our case of Security Bank and other banks such as BPI also. They made the pledge to no longer finance hazardous or anti-environmental producing companies. So if these companies have no more finance, no more liquidity to grow more, then they're definitely going to die out.
Just to add on that, I guess given how the population or how time has progressed, it certainly has gotten a shift towards people caring a lot more about the environment or the sustainability aspect. So in the future, even right now, there's a growing importance for it, which we think will probably stay.
Okay, those are all further questions.
I just want to ask one last one. You mentioned how you guys use the fundamentals with technicals, looking at sentiment as well, and overall. So how does the technical come in? Did you is that trying to time where you purchase, or is it just looking at how the technicals look? Can you answer it?
Okay, sorry. So the technical analysis side just refers to the company type, and as for the actual techniques that we used, it was very simple. Like the graph analysis for each graph we showed in the presentation. It's priced probably because admittedly we're quite new to the whole financial thing, but even then we think it's like the simple techniques used in all of these particular analysis could get us a really good grasp already in choosing all of these 5 stocks.
So I think no judges have further questions. I'd like to confirm. Yes. So I think we're good. Thank you so much, you guys.